The stars outside the USS Victory's bridge glittered in silence, distant and cold. Captain Nadia Sykes stood at the center, watching the holographic display of the star system. Her crew moved about with practiced precision, the soft hum of the ship's systems the only sound in the room. Routine patrol. Nothing more, nothing less. Or so she thought. "Captain," a voice broke the monotony. Lieutenant Commander Lila Chan, the sensor officer, looked up from her console. "I'm getting strange readings. Long-range scans show 2 UGA patrol ships in the sector, but their signatures are gone." Nadia's brow furrowed. "Gone," she repeated. "Do we know what happened to them?" "No sign of debris, no distress signals. Just, gone. They vanished." A cold knot twisted in her stomach. "Plot a course to their last known position. Now." The ship lurched as it accelerated into hyperspace, the stars stretching out into long, thin streaks. Nadia moved to the center of the bridge, her mind already racing. 2 ships weren't just disappearing without cause, something was happening out here, and she had to find out what. Minutes later, the Victory dropped back into normal space, and the vast emptiness of the distant system unfolded before them. The stars gleamed down, unblinking, indifferent. No signs of the missing ships. No signs of anything, until the first alert sounded. "Captain, I'm reading multiple vessels," Lila said, her voice now edged with tension. "Large ships. Incoming fast. They're not UGA." "How many?" Nadia's voice was calm, but inside, her pulse quickened. "At least 20. They're not using conventional signals. These are Sorlath ships." Sorlath. The name hit Nadia like a punch to the gut. The Sorlath were a dominant species in the galaxy, ruthless, calculating, and technologically advanced. The last thing humanity needed was a confrontation with them, especially so far from UGA-controlled space. "Raise shields and prepare for evasive maneuvers," Nadia ordered, her voice steady but urgent. "Helm, bring us around to a defensive position." "Shields up," Lieutenant Eric Hayes, the tactical officer, confirmed. "Course plotted, Captain. We're ready for evasive action." The Victory tilted slightly, the massive engines coming to life. The ship groaned under the sudden change of trajectory, but Nadia knew it was necessary. They couldn't afford to be an easy target. "How long until they're within weapons range?" she asked, turning back to Lila. 10 minutes, she replied, her fingers dancing over the controls. "But they're accelerating. At this rate, we'll be within range in 5. Nadia took a deep breath. The Sorlath were not known for subtlety. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't going to be a diplomatic greeting. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice echoing through the intercom system. "All hands, prepare for combat." As the crew scrambled into action, Nadia stayed at her post, her mind already running through their options. They were outnumbered, but not outgunned. The Victory was one of the most advanced warships in the fleet, fast, agile, and heavily armed. Still, the Sorlath had a reputation for overwhelming force. She would need more than firepower to survive this. A series of alarms blared, and the ship's hull vibrated as the first salvo of energy blasts rained down. The shields flickered but held steady, absorbing the energy. "Shields holding at 70%, Eric called out, his fingers moving furiously across his console. "Enemy ships closing in, Captain. They're targeting our engines." "Do not let them get a lock on our engines," Nadia ordered. "Helm, initiate evasive maneuvers now." The ship jolted as the Victory executed a series of rapid turns, the stars outside stretching in distorted arcs. The enemy ships followed, their own weapons charging up for another strike. Nadia could see them, massive, sleek, dark vessels that looked like war machines built for one purpose: destruction. "Enemy vessels incoming at 2 o'clock. Eric shouted, his voice tinged with urgency. "Firing solution locked." "Fire!" Nadia commanded, her eyes narrowing. A volley of energy blasts shot from the Victory's turrets, bright and deadly, but the Sorlath ships effortlessly evaded. They were fast, too fast. Nadia cursed under her breath. She had expected this level of resistance, but the speed and precision with which the Sorlath maneuvered made the victory seem sluggish by comparison. Another hit, this time on the forward shields. The ship shuddered under the impact, and the lights flickered momentarily. "Captain," Eric said quickly, "I'm detecting a power surge on one of their ships. It's charging a massive weapon. It's going to fire in less than a minute." Nadia's eyes sharpened. If they let that weapon go off, they wouldn't survive. They needed to act fast, or it would be over. "Ready the countermeasures," she ordered, her mind calculating their next move. "Lila, can you disrupt their targeting systems?" "I'll try," Lila said, her voice strained. Her hands flew over the controls. Targeting systems, engaged. A moment later, a ripple of static passed over the Victory's sensors, and the Sorlath ship's targeting grids blinked. Nadia saw the immediate effect. The lead Sorlath ship missed its firing mark by a wide margin, the deadly beam cutting through empty space where the Victory had been moments earlier. "That bought us some time," Nadia said, her gaze focused. "Helm, keep us moving. Keep them on the defensive." The Sorlath retaliated, a hail of blasts hitting the Victory's shields again. But this time, their weapons were less precise. The Sorlath had been thrown off course, just enough for Nadia's crew to regain the advantage. The Victory's cannons fired again, striking the nearest Sorlath vessel in a precise hit. The ship's shields flickered before they collapsed entirely, sending the vessel spinning. Nadia's heart pounded in her chest as the enemy ship detonated in a flash of light. One down. 19 to go. But the battle was far from over. The Sorlath fleet regrouped, their determination clear. Nadia felt the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not now. Not when humanity's future was hanging by a thread. "We're not out of this yet," she muttered under her breath. "Not by a long shot." The Victory raced through the stars, and the battle continued, each moment a test of willpower and resilience. This was just the beginning. The Victory limped through the black expanse, its engines growling in protest after the battering it had taken in the skirmish with the Sorlath fleet. The hum of the ship's power systems was strangely quiet in comparison to the chaos of the battle. The bridge crew, though weary, remained alert. No one was under the illusion that the danger was over. Captain Nadia Sykes stood near the command station, her eyes fixed on the darkened holographic map in front of her. The stars flickered, distant and cold, their light a stark reminder that she was far from safe. The Victory was heading toward the UGA-controlled space station at Ferris Station, where they would get repairs and, hopefully, more intel on what they'd just experienced. "Status report," Nadia's voice cut through the quiet. "Shields at 60%, Captain," Eric Hayes replied, his tone tense but steady. "Engines are running at minimal capacity, but we're holding together. No structural damage to report." "Good," Nadia said. She turned to Lieutenant Commander Lila Chan, who was at the sensor console. "What do we know about those ships?" Lila's fingers danced across the touchscreen, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've analyzed the enemy ships, Captain. They were Sorlath, all right, big ones, too. Heavy armor, advanced weapons. But it's not just them. Their fleet wasn't operating independently. I think they were part of something bigger. A coalition." "Coalition?" Nadia repeated. "With who?" Lila hesitated for a moment, scanning through the data. "The Sorlath have made alliances with at least 3 other species, several of whom are major players in the galaxy. The Kren, the Vornax, and the Galthor. These species are known for their brutal tactics and advanced tech." Nadia felt a chill slide down her spine. The Sorlath were dangerous enough on their own, but with this kind of backing? It was no longer just a border skirmish. Humanity was up against something far more deadly. "Are we sure?" Nadia asked, her voice cold with determination. "Can we confirm this coalition exists?" "Not yet," Lila replied, her voice tight. "But I'm seeing signs of coordination. They've been running joint missions for months now, attacks on uninhabited systems, supply raids along the fringe of UGA space. It's like they've been testing their strength. And now they're ready to move on humanity, Nadia said, her mind already racing through the possibilities. They've seen how fast we're expanding, and they don't want us to reach the core systems. They don't want us to become a threat. The bridge was quiet for a moment as the implications sank in. The Sorlath think we're a threat, Eric said, looking up from his console. Which means they're underestimating us. Nadia's lips curled into a tight smile, but there was no humor in it. It's not about underestimating us. It's about stopping us before we get too far. Lila spoke again, breaking the silence. Captain, we've just picked up a message transmission from the Sorlath fleet. Play it, Nadia ordered. A crackling sound filled the bridge, followed by a deep voice, gravelly and commanding. To the Terran ship, USS Victory, the voice boomed, cold and devoid of emotion. This is General Threxer of the Sorlath Coalition. Your actions have been noted. You will surrender immediately, or your species will be eradicated. We have the strength of the galaxy at our back. There is no place for you among the stars. Submit, or die. The message ended as abruptly as it began, leaving a silence in its wake. The crew exchanged looks, each one grappling with the weight of what had just been said. Eradicate us, Eric muttered. Like we're some kind of insect to be crushed. Nadia straightened, her jaw clenched. He doesn't understand. That's his mistake. Threxer is as ruthless as they come, Lila said, tapping a few more commands into her console. But it's not just him. The Sorlath are a proud race, and they've united with some of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Kren are a warrior race, aggressive, bloodthirsty. The Vornax are known for their brutal, precision strikes, and the Galthor are merciless, highly strategic. Together, they could wipe out entire star systems if they wanted to. Nadia took a deep breath, her mind spinning. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a declaration of war, a war that humanity hadn't asked for, but one they would fight to the bitter end. She knew her crew was capable, but they were also outnumbered and outgunned. The odds weren't in their favor, and the Victory couldn't fight an entire galactic alliance by itself. We're not fighting just to survive, she said, her voice low but resolute. We're fighting for our place in the galaxy. The Sorlath think they can intimidate us, that they can erase humanity like a stain on the fabric of the universe. But they've made a mistake. Lila met her gaze. What's the plan, Captain? First, we need intel, Nadia replied, her mind already working. We head to Ferris Station. We'll get repairs and gather every bit of information we can. We need to know everything about the Sorlath Coalition's movements, resources, and weaknesses. Then, we fight back. Eric shook his head. You want to go on the offensive already? Nadia nodded. We can't wait for them to make the next move. The longer we sit back, the more ground they take. We need to show them that humanity isn't some weakling race to be crushed underfoot. We have one advantage, Lila added. They're underestimating us. They think we'll buckle when they show their power. We've fought in ways they can't predict. The Sorlath can't grasp how resourceful humans are. Nadia's eyes flashed with something darker, resolve, fire, fury. Then let's make them regret that. The Victory continued its slow journey toward Ferris Station, but the tension on the bridge was palpable. Every crew member knew what was at stake. They were walking a thin line between survival and extinction. I'll make the jump to Ferris Station in 4 hours, Eric said, his hands moving over the helm controls. It's a risky move, but we'll be safe there for now. After that, we'll need to plan our next steps carefully. Good, Nadia replied. But don't think for a second that we're safe. We've made our presence known, and they'll be coming for us. We need to prepare. Start gathering intelligence from the station's network. Find out everything you can about the Sorlath's movements. We need to know who we're dealing with. The stars outside continued their indifferent twinkling, but to Nadia, they felt more like a battleground. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity's place in the galaxy. And she wasn't going to let anyone erase that. The docking bay of Ferris Station was a bustle of activity when the USS Victory arrived. It was a quiet, strategic location on the edge of UGA space, a place for ships to refuel, repair, and gather intelligence without drawing attention. The station itself was a tangle of narrow corridors and bustling trade routes, but to Captain Nadia Sykes, it was the calm before the storm. As soon as the Victory settled into its docking berth, the crew scrambled to begin the necessary repairs. Hull breaches had been patched, but the ship's energy systems still needed work, and the shields were barely functioning. They had made it here on sheer willpower, but they couldn't afford to stay too long. Nadia paced the observation deck, staring out at the stars, her thoughts heavy. The battle with the Sorlath fleet was just the beginning. The message they had received from General Threxer still echoed in her mind: humanity would be eradicated. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting for their place in the galaxy. A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Lieutenant Commander Lila Chan entering the room, a data pad in her hands. "Captain," Lila began, her voice tight. "I've gathered some intelligence from the station's network. It's not much, but it's enough to give us a starting point. The Sorlath Coalition isn't just a loose alliance of species, they're operating under a single unified command structure, headed by General Threxer." Nadia raised an eyebrow. "A single command? What's his strategy?" Lila set the data pad down on the table and began to swipe through the information. "Threxer is a tactical genius, ruthless, but intelligent. His forces are spread across multiple fronts. He's been running coordinated strikes on isolated colonies along the fringe of UGA space, weakening the perimeter defenses. They're testing our response times, probing for weaknesses. But there's something bigger. A central command ship, an enormous dreadnought, currently stationed near the Kren homeworld. From there, they're pulling all the strings." Nadia's gaze darkened. "A dreadnought? How big?" Lila flicked through the data. "It's nearly 6 kilometers long. Armed with devastating long-range weapons and a fleet of support vessels. It's a war machine, designed to obliterate any resistance in its path." "Perfect." Nadia's tone was sharp. "So Threxer and his coalition are preparing for something more than just border skirmishes. They're planning an all-out assault." "Exactly," Lila confirmed. "And there's more. The Kren have developed a new form of kinetic weapon, capable of tearing through shield systems. It's still experimental, but if it works as they intend, it'll bypass most defensive technologies." "Damn." Nadia turned her back on the station's viewport, her mind racing. They couldn't face a dreadnought with their current strength, not unless they found a way to level the playing field. "We're not just dealing with a military threat here," Lila continued. "The Sorlath are pushing for a political conquest as well. They want to destabilize UGA influence in the Outer Rim. If they succeed, they'll control key trade routes and access to valuable resources." Nadia crossed her arms, mulling over the information. "We need more. A way to neutralize their fleet before they get the chance to strike at Earth." Lila nodded. "I'm working on that. But the Kren and the Galthor are known for their secrecy. If we don't get more detailed intel on their ships and weaponry, we might walk straight into a trap." A silence stretched between them as Nadia stared out into the void. The weight of the situation pressed down harder with each passing second. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but humanity had one thing the Sorlath couldn't account for: determination. "Have you had any luck with the station's underworld?" Nadia asked after a moment. "Anything we can use?" Lila's expression shifted, a glint of something darker in her eyes. "I've made a few inquiries. There's a group here, freelancers, mercenaries. They're not picky about who they work for, but they know their way around dangerous missions. If anyone can get us information on the Sorlath and their allies, it's them." "Good," Nadia said, her voice firm. "Get me a meeting with them." Lila turned to leave but paused at the door. "One more thing, Captain. There's talk on the station that the Sorlath are gathering a large fleet near the Kren homeworld. They're preparing for a major offensive. If we don't act soon, they might already be too entrenched to push back. Nadia felt her heart rate quicken. They didn't have time to waste. I'll handle the mercenaries, Lila said. But you should gather the senior staff. We need to plan our next move, and fast. Nadia assembled the senior staff in the briefing room shortly after. The atmosphere was thick with the gravity of their situation. The map of the galaxy flickered on the screen, highlighting the Sorlath's known positions and their probable routes. The Kren homeworld was a focal point, surrounded by several military installations and colonies already under siege. We have one shot at this, Nadia began, standing at the front of the room, her voice steady. We cannot let the Sorlath Coalition gain any more ground. Our immediate goal is to strike at their command structure, destroy the dreadnought before they can bring it into full operation. How are we going to do that? Eric Hayes asked, his tone skeptical but focused. We can't even get close to that thing with their fleet surrounding it. Lila stepped forward, holding up the data pad she'd retrieved earlier. We need to weaken their fleet first. We've been gathering intel on the Kren's new weapon, something that could give us the edge we need. I'm negotiating with some mercenaries here on Ferris Station. If we can get access to that technology, we might have a chance. And what about the rest of the Sorlath Coalition? Lieutenant Commander Ryo Nakamura, the chief strategist, asked. They won't just sit back and let us take out their flagship. Nadia nodded, acknowledging the concern. We need to act swiftly. Hit them hard enough that they can't retaliate before we make our move on the dreadnought. We use the Kren's weapon to disable their shields, then we destroy their command ship. The rest of the fleet will be vulnerable, and we can take it from there. Risky, Eric muttered, but his eyes gleamed with the sort of enthusiasm that only came from a person ready to face impossible odds. Nadia turned to the crew, her gaze unwavering. We're not just defending Earth anymore. We're defending humanity's place in the stars. Whatever happens, we fight for our future. The room fell silent, each member processing the weight of the task ahead. In that silence, Nadia felt a surge of conviction. The Sorlath thought they could erase humanity from the galaxy, but they had no idea what kind of enemy they were up against. As the crew filed out of the room to begin preparations, Nadia stood alone for a moment, staring at the map. It was time to show the Sorlath exactly why humanity was the galaxy's most terrifying warrior species.